Hello everyone, my name is Karthika and I'm the host for today's immigration talk on Indus TV. We have with us attorney Poonam Bhuchar. Hello Poonam, welcome.
Hi Karthika, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Welcome to Immigration Talk on Indus TV and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So today we will be talking about a new visa category, EB5, and we'll be getting into the nitty-gritties with Poonam. She's an expert on that topic and she'll walk us through that entire category. So Poonam, let's get straight to the point and let's ask you a very basic question. What is EB5 visa?
Good question, Karthika. So EB5 is known as the fifth employment-based visa, and it was created in 1990 by Congress to create jobs in the US and also to bring in foreign capital into the US to help boost the economy. And the purpose of it was for people to create 10 jobs, full-time jobs, by starting what's considered to be a new commercial enterprise. And the definition of new commercial enterprise changes depending on whether you invest in a business after 1990 or prior to 1990. So basically, it's to allow foreign people to come into the country, boost the economy, and create jobs.
So basically bring in some money and create permanent employment for American people.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what are some of the different ways in which the EB5 can be obtained?
EB5, to cover the entire method in the short period of time that we have, but I'll break it down and make it very simple. Okay. So there are gray areas, but the two major ways of doing it is through direct investment. That is that you as a sole proprietor, as a shareholder, as a subsidiary, for profit, create a new commercial enterprise, and you have to show that over a period of time that you are creating 10 full-time jobs for US workers. And you have to invest, depending on the area in which you invest in, you invest $500,000 currently or $1 million, whereas before or 900,000, whereas before it was recently it was 900,000 and 1.8 million. The other method of doing it is through what we call a regional center. So it's almost like saying the regional centers have been pre-approved by USCIS as qualifying for EB5 investment, and you can invest in a regional center, and that regional center will have shown that they can create 10 jobs indirectly or directly. Whereas if you do it through direct investment, you have to directly show that you have created 10 jobs.
So the regional center will do the work for you and you invest money with them rather than doing it directly on your own.
Absolutely. So with a direct investment, you have to be fully involved in that commercial enterprise. Whereas with a regional center, you just literally invest the money and they do the work.
They do the work all the work for you.
Right.
Okay, so it's you doing the work versus they doing the work.
Exactly.
What is the process using this EB5? I mean, what are the benefits? Do we get a permanent residency? We get the green cards? How does that work?
So it varies case to case, but generically what we're looking at is whether you do a regional center or direct investment, you file what's known as the 526 with USCIS. The unfortunate thing today is if you look at the visa bulletin, the green card is current for EB5s. Typically for India and China, there have been backlogs, but you can't file your conditional green card until you've gotten the first stage approved, and that's basically to show USCIS that the source of funds is clean and that your investment is valid. Unfortunately, today, that process is taking anywhere from 36 to 72 months before you can even apply to get your conditional green card. And the reason you get the conditional green card is to show that the investment is continue to be at what they call at risk, and that you're in the process of creating the jobs. And once that has been done, after you obtain the conditional green card, you then have to remove the conditions by filing an 824, and then you will obtain the permanent green card. So right now, on average, for somebody in India, just because the first process is taking so long, you're looking at not obtaining a conditional green card for at least 4 to 5 years and potentially even 6. And then when you apply for the conditional green card, that process, including the 2 years in the application process, may be another 2 to 3 years. And then filing the 824 also has a backlog. So unfortunately, until the first part is cleared, the other 2 steps can't move much quicker.
And as of now, just to clear the first is almost like 5 to 6 years.
Well, it's anywhere from 3 to 6 years.
3 to 6 years.
Yes.
And how long is that provisional green card? 2 years, 3 years?
So the 3 to 6 years, you haven't even applied for your conditional green card. Once you apply for the conditional green card, the green card is valid for 2 years.
2 years. And then in those 2 years, you apply for the permanent green card.
That's right. You apply to remove the conditions of that green card 90 days prior to those 2 years expiring. And then that has its own process.
Processing time keeps on increasing at every step.
Right.
Okay, so that's fairly long.
Right, it is. But for some categories, it's still quicker than applying through certain categories today. Maybe if someone applied for a H-1B perm application in I-140 today under 2021 priority date, it could still be quicker for them.
Quicker, but not quick enough, maybe.
Maybe.
So people keep talking about a term called targeted employment area when they talk about EB5s. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure, Karthika. So it's a critical area for people that want to invest money. Targeted employment area means it's either a rural population that has less than 20,000 people, or it's an area in which the unemployment rate is 150% above the national average. So prior to November 2019, the targeted employment area was left in the hands of each state as to what they considered to be the target employment area. In 2019, when the law changed and the amounts were increased from 500 to 900,000 and 1 million to 1.8, that was taken away from the states and given to the Department of Homeland Security. So, which would mean that there would be less targeted employment areas. And the reason everybody wants to know about the targeted employment areas is because that's where they get to put the lesser amount for the EB5 investment. So that's why people want to know what those areas are. Now, recently though, because, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this going forward, but recently due to a case, the targeted employment area has now been given back to the state. So at least for a short period of time, the state will get to determine what those targeted employment areas are, and people would be allowed to invest the 500,000 in those areas.
So because we are on that topic, so let's continue this discussion a little bit more. So what are these changes which keep happening over like last few years, the previous administration and now this administration? There are a lot of back and forth going on. So I am sure this targeted area falls in one of those changes which are happening on and off. So can you explain a little bit in detail about those changes?
Absolutely. So to your point, there have been changes and there have been a lot of back and forth, especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So back in November 2019, the end of November 2019, the Trump administration had passed a law to increase the amount that needs to be invested. And the 500,000 for a targeted employment area moved to 900,000, and the 1 million moved to 1.8. And obviously what that means is less people are likely to invest. So back into November 2019, there was a mad rush to get all these applications in for 500,000. Since then, there has been a decline in the amount of EB5s that have been filed, due to COVID and also because the amounts have increased so much. When that law took place, there was a regional center, Bering Regional Center, that filed an injunction in federal court. And the injunction was to basically say that the U.S. Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Kevin McAllen at the time, was unlawfully appointed, and therefore they violated the Administrative Procedures Act. They didn't follow certain procedures, and therefore they wanted this whole thing to become invalidated. Bering Regional Centre actually won that at the end of June. So at least right now, for a temporary period of time, the 900,000 has fallen back to 500,000. The targeted employment areas have moved back to the states.
As you were just telling us before.
Right,
yes.
which is beneficial. Now, we don't know whether the current Secretary of Homeland Security, Alexandra Marcus, is going to reenact the law that was from 900,000 and 1.8 million. There's talks that they will, which means for people that want to invest at the 500,000 level, you have a very short window to do so. One of the other changes that has taken place is that the regional center expires every year. But every year there is a renewal based into congressional budget, and it sunsets at the end of June. But what happened this year was it was taken out of the congressional budget, so there was no automatic renewal. And because the law couldn't be passed on time, you cannot right now, as of today, apply for the regional center, because the regional centers have the applications for regional centers has expired as of the end of June. Is it likely that the law will be automatically renewed? It is. We have to see how long it takes now, because there was no automatic renewal. And there are a couple of bills in Congress right now that, I think Senator Grassi is looking to push to get passed. But until that does, nobody can apply through the regional center. But right now, you can apply as a direct investment for 500,000 until the law gets reenacted again to 900,000, or we see what happens.
So direct investment, $500,000 is the only option right now.
If you want to do that minimum investment, absolutely. And it would have to be in a targeted employment area.
Okay. So you have to put in your papers now.
Absolutely.
Before it gets too late.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we don't know whether we'll go back to 900, we'll stay at 500. There is no certainty as of now.
There isn't right now.
So we have been talking about $500,000 for a targeted direct investment, but $500,000 is not a small amount of money, especially for people coming from India. So what are some of the sources these funds can come from?
The most important thing is that the funds have to be sourced, which means you have to show that it's clean money and that you have to be able to backtrack every source that it has come from. So you would have to provide, depending on where it came from, tax returns, property paperwork. If it's a loan secured by an asset, you'd have to show that asset, how that asset was, where that asset came from, how you came about buying it, which funds you came about buying it from. It can come from a gift. We've had clients that have gifted their children money, and obviously from India there's limits as to how much money you can take out per year, so they plan in advance. Or we work with accountants and CPAs who are well versed in this area to bring the money out. It can come from a variety of places. The most important thing, though, is to show where that money came from, and you'd have to have all the documentation to provide that. And in some instances where there is not that documentation, we've provided affidavits and different kinds of things to show that, but it has to be from legal sources. It can't be from the black market. It has to be legal sources.
So it has to be absolutely clean money where you can trace it back to the origins.
Absolutely.
Kind of. Okay, and that might be a little difficult.
It is, especially for somebody you're talking about built $500,000 over the last 20 years in India and bought property, but they don't have the property paperwork. They don't know where the money came from. There's money sitting in the savings account and they don't know how to account for it all. But that's where you can work with an attorney who works in conjunction with CPAs that are well versed in this area to help.
And is the scrutiny really tied on
you?
It is. Okay.
Especially because there are various acts that come into play. So there's a Foreign Corruptions Act. You need to make sure that, there's no bribery involved anywhere. There were no kickbacks involved anywhere, because these are federal acts that if you violate can have some serious consequences.
The penalties can be really high.
Absolutely.
Okay, so clean money, lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's basically a $500,000 question.
Exactly.
So Poonam, I'll backtrack a little bit. We were talking about the processing times for the EB5 to get a provisional green card. So just a little more detail about how long, what are the backlogs, right, we are looking at this point, if we apply today, let's say.
So if you apply today, the likelihood is that India and China are still going to remain backlogged, okay, for a number of years. But if you apply today, the EB5, the first stage, the 526, as we said, is taking about 35 to 72 months. And then you apply for the conditional green card, and then you apply for the removal of conditions. The truth is, by the time people have gotten their conditional green card, the stress level comes down a little bit because they can work where they want to. And if it's a regional center, then the hopes is that the jobs have been created and they're taking care of the whole paperwork that needs to be provided along with your attorney. The issue becomes with the backlogs is, again, the green cards are current today, but for India and China, we're anticipating that the backlog is going to be more, which until there are changes that take place in the EB5 or how visas are counted, those backlogs aren't likely to move very quickly, especially for China and India.
So are there any changes in proposals, some new laws in making to handle this?
So there are plenty of proposals. It's a matter of what gets passed. So one of the proposals is that, and we're seeing this for the other employment-based categories, that the derivatives, so if a principal is applying, that their family members do not get counted towards the visa numbers, which would free up so many, because if one family has 4 people, then 3 of them are being counted unnecessarily. So that's one proposal. The other proposal that they're talking about is, instead of having these per country limits, the 7% per country limit for each country, regardless of the size of the country, they're talking about, for at least EB5, a first come in, first out basis. So a first come, first served basis for filing the applications. There are lots of proposals to try and bring in the money into the country. And I can tell you personally that we're seeing people very hesitant right now, even because of COVID, that if the numbers go up, the higher amounts, they're less reluctant to put in the money. So I think we're all hoping that the money stays at the minimum amount of 500,000 and $1 million to create more jobs and bring investment into the country, because we are seeing that reluctancy since 2019.
So the number of people who are applying for EB5 has gone down. Is that?
And I think, since the higher amounts, yes, but I think that's also because we don't know, right? Because COVID came into play, people were less reluctant. There was so many people losing their jobs. The economy was all over the place. So I think we'll really be able to tell going forward. But the minimum amount is something that is more plausible for a lot of people.
Yeah, obviously, like 900,000 and 1.8 million, sounds a crazy number.
So I'd just like to say something with regards to the backlogs, that something that we help people do through attorneys that we work with. Just because there is a backlog doesn't mean that you can't apply for the EB5 and stay in the country in another kind of category, whether it's the H1, whether it's an E2. That's done a lot to bring you in so that you can stay while the EB5 is continuing.
So that's a big thing, because if you apply and let's say somebody who does not have a valid visa to stay in the country, they cannot come in the country till they get the provisional green card. Am I right?
That is right. That's absolutely correct. And there are ways bringing somebody into the country, not just on a H1B. There's the E2 visa that is used a lot. There's ways of getting residency in other countries to bring people over. There's many unique creative ways that we can do it to help people.
Okay, and that's a really, really important piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely, because I think people are less hesitant to put the money down if they can be in the country and they're earning in dollars and they're, putting that money down versus just leaving it from abroad and just sitting waiting there for their conditional green
And
card.
for a lot of people, like parents or people like that, the biggest thing is they can be with their family. Once they put in the money, they can be secure and safe with their family in the country, which makes a big difference.
Absolutely. We're actually seeing in over the past few years, prior to the amount going out, a lot of parents doing it for the children, so they make sure that the children can, even though the parents are in India, making sure that the children can obtain their green card prior to going to college.
Yeah, so they don't have to fight for the F1s.
And they don't have to worry about the age out rules and
yes.
things like that.
Okay, that's really, really helpful information. So Poonam, before we wrap up this wonderful conversation and very informative conversation, we have a couple of questions from our audience which I would like for you to answer.
I'd love to. Sure.
I would play the first question for you.
Hi, my name is Rupali and I'm on H-1B visa. Can I apply for EB5 visa?
So absolutely, Rupali, you can. We recommend that if you're going to apply for the EB5 visa, even if you have an I-140 approved for EB2, EB3, you can still apply for an EB5 visa, but please be cognizant of the fact that the priority date doesn't port for the EB5. But it's good to file for the EB5, have your priority date for the EB2, EB3, so that if the EB5 is taking a little longer, you can continue to extend your H1 and stay until the EB5 goes through.
Okay, so but very clearly you cannot put in dates, like between EB2 and EB3 you can,
no.
but...
Yeah, exactly. Between EB2 and EB3 you can, but you cannot port that date to an EB5.
EB5. Okay, that makes sense. I hope that answered your question, Rupali. We have just one more question for you.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Mukund. My question is, how do I differentiate a good EB5 regional center from a bad one? Thank you.
So that's a great question, Mukund. It's one that we get a lot. So in theory, having the designation of a regional center, you would assume means that everything is okay, but we still require everybody to do their due diligence, have a financial advisor who understands the numbers, who can look at the portfolio and go through the numbers and see that it seems to be valid. And also have a corporate attorney go through the corporate documents and advise you of what your liability is. Because don't forget, once you put that money down, in a lot of the centers, just because you don't get the visa or if you decide to withdraw, doesn't mean you get the money back. Okay. That money may still be held for 5 years, depending on what the agreement says. The other thing to remember is just because a regional center is good today, in 5 years' time, it could potentially lose its designation as a regional center if it's not continuing to do what it needs to. So while there are no guarantees and there's nobody that can provide you a guarantee, it's good to go with a reputable regional center and to make sure that you have done your due diligence for that particular project with the financial advisor, the CPA, the corporate attorney, along with your immigration attorney, and to give yourself the best possible chance.
And just to reiterate, we were talking about it. As of now, regional centers are all into the expiration mode, right?
Absolutely. So
Yes.
today it doesn't matter because
Yes.
you can't apply.
Right.
But for anybody that is looking to, when it does come back,
Yeah.
when it does come back, for anybody looking to do the due diligence, you can do it now.
Now is the right time.
Now's the right time to ask all the questions, to go and see the projects, to find the regional centers with your immigration attorneys and figure out where you want to put the money.
Thank you so much, Poonam, for sparing time for such an important topic, especially with all the changes happening these days. The fluidity is actually very confusing for everybody. So thank you so much for coming out here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to help.
So for any legal services, please feel free to contact Poonam. Her email address is poonam@bhucharlaw.com. This is your host Kartika signing off. Take care.